All right, so we'll go ahead and get started here. We're going to talk about, conquering procrastination. What I'd like for you to do is introduce yourself and, just kind of tell me what your major is, a little bit about you. So I'll start there.
Well, I'm majoring. My major is social work, and I'm from St. Louis.
Okay, all right, St. Louis, big city.
I'm Alicia. I'm from St. Louis, and my major is early childhood special education.
Okay. My wife is a teacher. She started off as an elementary teacher, taught 4th and 5th grade for several years, and then she taught middle school for 1 year, and then she became a special education teacher because she got certified to be, because once you get your teacher's license, at least in Oklahoma, you can go back and take tests. As long as you pass those, you get certified in those areas. So she has multiple certifications, one of those in special ed, and that's what she currently does right now. So it's a good field, very high demand field. You never have to worry about finding a job. I mean, they always need it. Now you got to ask yourself, why is that? But it's a lot of work. So it's kind of like my wife is always joking because it's just kind of like the mafia, because once you're in, you never get out. Because it's so hard to find special education teachers. So once you have that experience, a lot of school districts, that's what they want you to do. So it's hard to say, what, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go back to being an elementary teacher. It's kind of hard. So once you're in for life pretty much. So just saying.
Oh, hi, I'm Ashley, and my major is in social work, but my minor is in history.
Okay.
I'm in St. Louis.
I minored in history, loved history. So well, dealing with procrastination, I mean, what's the first thing, before we really look at this, what's the first thing that kind of comes to mind? Procrastination, especially when it involves maybe you. What stands out to you?
Not doing my assignments on time.
Okay, not doing your assignments on time. What else? Anything else?
Last minute.
Last minute, yes. And I would tell you, the majority of students fall in that category at some point. That last minute assignment. See, some people confuse procrastination as being lazy. I think there's a difference between lazy and procrastination. I think, lazy is just not wanting to do anything at all. I mean, just nothing. I think procrastination is that, you are finding ways not to do what you need to be doing. You may have an assignment, but you will go actively out of your way to find something else to do before you eventually will go back and doing that. And so we have to kind of figure out, why are you doing that? And so that's something that we're going to look at, kind of that why and things that you can be doing to try to help you with that. Because instead of just saying, oh, okay, this is what procrastination is, I'm a little bit more concerned about solutions. How can you actually fix it? So that's what we'll look at. So we'll talk about, about how not to procrastinate, and then ways to conquer procrastination, then we'll kind of conclude. So some strategies for beating procrastination. I think in the end, you have to know why, you are, procrastinating, and you have to know the consequences for those actions. If you don't turn in your paper for a class, what's going to happen? You're going to get an F. And now if you continue this, pattern, not doing assignments and not doing what you're supposed to, in the end, what's going to happen? You're going to be in college long, or eventually going to flunk out. So you have to kind of know why, you're in school. And I think a lot of students kind of forget that sometimes. Think about when you start here, that first semester, and then if you're able to make it to that 3rd and 4th year, your junior and senior. I mean, it's easy to lose sight of why you're doing all this. You think about all the things that in between. You're going to classes, you're probably working, you're trying to balance everything. It's kind of hard to see that light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. You may want to be, an educator or a social worker, but you got to take all these classes, you got to do all these assignments to get to that place. And sometimes it's just hard remembering why you're actually doing all that stuff for. I'll give you an example. When I was in graduate school, and I got my master's degree at OU, and I lived in a small town, and so I had to commute to go to Norman, Oklahoma. And so one way, from my house to that college was 60 miles. I had to drive 60 miles one way, 120 miles round trip a day when I went there. And so, well, I worked during the day, and I took, our classes were 3 hours long at night. We met once a week for each class, and normally in graduate school, 9 hours is full time, because you do like twice the workload in those classes. So I typically took 6 hours a semester. So I took 2 classes. I normally met like Tuesday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. And so it's just a couple days a week, but I had to do that 120 miles round trip and stuff. Ooh. And so you can kind of get burned out, and you start to question, is this really the right decision I made? Especially it's blizzard-like conditions. I'm driving 60 miles one way. going 20 miles an hour in some cases, just trying to get to that college that, you know, they didn't close. You know, and so, and, you know, if it may be bad in one area, but maybe it's not bad where the college is at weather-wise, so you're still going. And so, you know, you question yourself, you know, do I have the motivation to continue to do this? And so, I mean, I question myself quite a bit. And I remember when I went back and was taking more graduate hours, I went to this place in Edmond, Oklahoma Central University, and that was 75 miles, one way. You know, so crazy, I know. And so you question yourself, why am I doing this? You know, so, I mean, it's perfectly normal to be stressed out, you know, to, you know, be trying to juggle, you know, a lot of other things. And sometimes you're going to have those moments, you know, where you just, you know, you don't want to do the work, you know. And so I don't consider that being lazy, you know. I just consider that, you know, you're getting burned out, you're tired, and you have to try to find ways to remember why you are actually in school. And that's sometimes hard to do. And so you kind of have to check, you know, yourself just a little bit every once in a while about why you're doing it. I do think creating a, you know, to-do list helps, you know, especially with all the different assignments that you're doing. A lot of times, you know, we feel like we're starting to fall behind and we just stop doing it. I think, you know, creating a to-do list will allow you to each day to really look at the assignments that need to actually be done. So think about Blackboard. I'm sure you have had assignments that are due on Blackboard. You know, I would imagine that if you have a class where you have assignments that are on Blackboard, you should be checking Blackboard just about every day, just to play it safe, because you never know when a professor is going to, you know, throw something out there. You know, maybe an additional reading or whatever it may be. So checking Blackboard, checking your email regular. I've had students in the past that had been here for almost 2 years, never have checked their email, not even one time. It happens. And so, okay, so all I would say is I would be checking it on a regular basis. Now, I will say there are some professors that are not going to be very active on Blackboard. They're not going to shoot you a lot of emails, so you may not have to worry about it. But there are other professors, that's how they do everything almost. You know, is through, you know, some type of social media or, you know, or whatever. So you've got to be careful, create that to-do list. I used to do that in college where I would create what I need to accomplish for that day. Now, some people go all elaborate, fancy planners, and, you know, that's always an option. But I just had sticky notes and just jotted down some things I needed to do, and then I would just mark it out as I'm going. And, you know, that would kind of create a sense of accomplishment when I was knocking those out, marking them off. And so some other things, you know, I think you need to break jobs into smaller steps. You know, go after, you know, some of the easier assignments maybe in the beginning. Have you ever had that feeling where you had a lot of assignments coming in at once, and instead of, you kind of get that overwhelming feeling and you just want to shut down and not do it? Yeah, yes, and so it can become overwhelming. So I would argue that you need to, you know, just kind of sit down and say, okay, what's one of the easier assignments that I can get done, you know, probably pretty quick? And so what that does is like a snowball effect. You know, you knock out one, then you start going after another, and eventually you're caught up. You know, so just break it down into small pieces. You know, do the easier ones first potentially. You know, and honestly, once you start doing that, you're just going to get in that routine and you'll start doing it that way. I remember my first 2 weeks of college when I started, I was definitely overwhelmed. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do it. And I took, well, it's kind of like the UE class that they have, you know, the time about study skills and all that stuff. And I remember my instructor in that class telling me, you know what, just take your time, focus on one assignment at a time. And now her philosophy was, you know, choose the assignment, you know, that's not just the easiest, but also which one's due, you know, sooner. And do that one first, and then go to the next, and go to the next. And so that's what I would do, and it seemed to help. I think you also have to promise yourself, you know, about getting a reward of some sort. What are some of the things that you like to do to reward yourself? Let's say you've had a long week, you know, you've got most of the stuff done, or maybe you did really good on a paper or test. What do you do for fun? How do you know, relax?
Netflix.
What's that?
Netflix.
Okay, Netflix. Yep. What else? Netflix as well? Maybe? Okay. Okay. So TV. You like TV? Okay. What else? Anything else that you do that maybe is a little bit different that maybe other people don't do, but it just works for you? What about the gym? You like going to the gym at all? No gym. No gym. Okay. Well, that's going to be one of our slides later on, by the way. Go to the gym. So I always preach the gym largely for students because you're paying $150 a semester. Whether you go there or not, you're paying. So I always say, go to the gym. You know, you go twice, 2-3 days a week, at least that's something, and you know, you're not just giving them $150. You know, so you know, always, you know, take advantage of that stuff. What about movies here on campus? I mean, they're free movies, and they play a lot, you know, kind of throughout the semester. I know this week Justice League is coming on. Then you got next week, I think the Thor movie's next week.
Yeah.
I mean, which is a great movie, by the way. So But yeah, I mean, reward yourself by going to some of the things that here on campus. They have comedians. I think there was a comedian this week. I mean, so, you know, have fun, and it doesn't cost you anything. I mean, because technically you're already paying for it, part of your fees. You know, so you might as well take advantage of that. Some other stuff, obviously the planner. Some people, you know, live and breathe by the planner. I've never been a big fan of it, you know, but I do see, you know, the benefits of it. You know, I will say that it helps create organization, you know, and how many of you would say that you're organized, that you're really organized? Okay, so you're really organized. Tell me how you stay organized. What do you do specifically?
I do the planning. I
Okay.
would write everything down every day.
Okay, that's good. I know some people like their phone. They program things into their phone, you know, reminders. Have any of you done that? Okay, so you're more rely on the phone to remind me that when I need to do something. So it doesn't mean that you have to go out and buy a planner, you know, today. It just means that you may want to be organized. I have some, you know, students will say, it's all in my mind. You know, I know what I need to do. They don't write it down, nothing. It's just, you know, they'll remember. You know, now, maybe they can. Maybe they have that ability. But I think that there's at least a more likelihood that they're going to forget something. If you got a lot of different things going on, you're keeping it all in your head, you're going to forget something at least one day. And so I don't think that's the best approach. Also, set realistic study times. How many of you, you know, before test have decided, I'm going to cram the night before, 6 hours, whatever, just nonstop? Okay. Can it work? Can it work? Okay. I couldn't do that. It didn't work for me.
I never like do it days before. I do it like the day before.
The day
Or
of.
the day before.
And I will say that, and I've seen a lot of students that have done well. You know, that they can cram and they can do it. I just wasn't one of those students, you know, that was able to do that. I will tell you, graduate school, it's almost impossible. And the reason why is, like, you know, as an undergrad, sometimes you can kind of get away with it because, you know, I mean, maybe you're only being tested over a couple chapters. You know, maybe, you know, you have a paper that's due that's between maybe 2, 3, 4 page paper or whatever. In graduate school, you know, I typically had a 20 to 25 page research paper every class. There's just no way, you know, that they have the time to be able to cram and get it all done. I mean, because you have to have X amount of resources, so you got to read all these journals, all these books and stuff. I mean, it was a process. And I remember some of the students that were in the graduate program with me, you know, our first semester there, they were still they still had the mentality of an undergraduate, and they were waiting until the last minute to do the paper, and they were struggling. You know, they did not turn in good quality work. And so I remember one student who was cramming, just trying to get it done. He ended up getting caught for plagiarism. You know, I mean, he was rushing, he didn't cite his things like he was supposed to, and, you know, he was kicked out of the program, you know, because the professor had this no tolerance, and so he went in front of a board, you know, because he was accused of it, and then eventually they, you know, voted to kick him out of the program. And so, but he just made mistakes because he was just waiting until the last second. So the reason why I say it's important to start now is because you are building habits that are going to help you for down the road. I mean, are any of you even remotely considering graduate school at one point? And so that's why I would say it's good to build the habits now, because when you transition into, you know, graduate school, I mean, you think that you have independence now, you know, like, because I mean, you just show up to class, you either do your assignment or you don't. I mean, graduate school is very similar to that as well. I mean, but the only difference is that the assignments are longer. You know, I mean, typically you write a lot more in graduate school. Now, every program is different. They have their own emphasis. I mean, I would imagine that business, you know, majors, for example, probably don't have to do a lot of writing. But when you think about social work, you know, like mine was in public administration. Boring degree, by the way. I would never recommend it. It was boring. And so, but political science, history, you write. I mean, you write papers, you have to do research. And so waiting a day or two before, I don't think will work, you know, that effective in graduate school. So build the habits now, because it's going to help you later on. You know, I mean, that's what you're planning for, you know, for down the road. Also, you know, you want to use waiting time to review. I mean, how many of you get a break in between classes? You know, any, like, you know, nice little space there, maybe a couple hours, hour or two. What do you do during that time?
Sleep.
Okay, sleep. And I do think there are some weeks that you can do that. I mean, you may not have a lot going on. But what happens, you know, if you just have a very hectic schedule, you're working and so forth? Because I have a lot of, you know, students I know that are working, you know, 30, 40 hours a week, plus trying to go to school full time. And I mean, every minute counts, you know, the spare time that they have. And so what could you be doing during those breaks?
Studying.
Studying. Or at least looking up, just glancing over your notes, for the next class. And that's something that I think is always important. When you write your notes, how many of you go back and read them every single day? Most people don't.
Maybe 3 days.
Okay, but hey, that's still good. That's still good. And so, you need to find your best time to study. So, if you want to avoid procrastination, you actually have to, make yourself study. But I think you also need to pick the right times to study. I'm not a morning person. I never have been. And so when I would try to study in the morning, I wasn't productive. I just wasn't functioning, at the level that I wanted early in the morning. I've always been a night person. To me, it seems like, and you can kind of beat up yourself a little bit, like, man, I should have done this, I should have done that, and then you think you're procrastinating, you're not doing what you're supposed to, but really, it's just that you're picking the wrong times to do it. Since I was a night person, I'd be up 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning writing papers. That's just, I function, better at night. Honestly, I've never really had to have that much sleep. I typically, when I was in school, I'd go to bed 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd get up around 6, 7. I can easily function on 3 or 4 hours of sleep. That was not a big deal for me. But maybe that's why I was tired in the morning. It just took me a little time to wake up. But it seemed just nighttime worked perfect for me. What would you consider yourself? Morning person, afternoon, night person? Okay, so night person. So if you choose to study in the morning time, that's probably not going to be your best time, probably, versus night. Now, another thing that you have to factor in is if you have a job. You may have a job where, you work until 11 o'clock at night, so that may make it a little bit more difficult. So you have to always factor that in a little bit as well. But yeah, definitely determine what type of person you are, morning, night person, because you may just be picking the wrong times to study, which is you may get the appearance that you're procrastinating, but really you're just choosing the wrong time. And then the other one is, in the end, you have to be flexible. If you are not flexible and you are so, organized, and you have your planner for every little single event throughout the day, what happens is something happens and just, an event happens, you can't get it done, it throws you completely off. And so you always have to remember, doesn't necessarily mean that, you're procrastinating, if something goes wrong. It just means you have to adjust. Be flexible enough where you can make those adjustments. What happens if, someone got sick in your family and you had to go back to St. Louis? What would happen with that week if that happened, something happened like that, and you had to go back to St. Louis? Would that throw your schedule off? Yeah, it would throw it off. But there are ways to work with that. One, contacting your professors, letting them know what's going on. That's the first step right there. So instead of your professor thinking, oh, this person's not showing up for class, they don't seem to care, doesn't look like they're doing their assignments, so they're going to be thinking that you're lazy, procrastinating, not doing what you're supposed to, you're trying to get excuses, to get extended deadlines and that stuff. Instead, you address it early, you talk to them, you let them know what's going on, and then they're not going to be thinking that you're just not doing your assignment. And then who's to say that you can't bring some of that homework with you up there? You may not be able to do very much up there with depending on what the situation is, but you at least can go and look at it here and there. And so you have to find ways to adjust. Some things that I think are important dealing with procrastination. I do think a student needs to be able to take good notes. And I've taught government history, I've taught the UE classes. Before I came here, I taught government history. Did that for 5.5 years. So I was more in the classroom, working with students. And so, I could see the ones, I remember I loved it because I'd have some students, they wrote every little single word down that I said on there. I don't know how they did it, because I like to ramble on. But they wrote everything down. And then you had others that took absolutely no notes. And I always loved the ones that the eyes would roll back because you could tell they're getting ready to fall asleep. And I'd start to see the eyes kind of move back and then they're out code. And so as I'm watching them, I'm seeing who's taking notes, who's not. And then I typically, when I was given the exams, the ones that took notes or regular in class, they generally did better. They generally caught the little things that I was looking for on the test. Because a lot of our tests, were multiple choice, but there's also essays on there. And so those ones that were taking detailed notes, they knew what I was wanting. And I would see those words, the things that I was talking about in class on those essays. The ones that didn't take any notes, their essays, some were okay, but most of them were just very general. Just very general, not very specific, but just kind of overall. And so I could see the difference. And so that's why I think, note taking, is so important, because it's going to create more structure for you, and it gives you something to study later on, when you're going through your notes. So that's why I emphasize about note taking. There's different styles. I mean, I'm going to focus on primarily one, which I think is really great. I mean, now they have like, Cornell, that's something that we'll talk about. They have the outline format, paragraph, and list format. Most students will do the list format. And that is basically just jot stuff down like bullet points. And not a lot of structure, just writing as much as you can in little bullet points. I mean, that's the most common one out there. This one is, the one that I feel that can really help you with procrastination, because this creates a lot of structure, with your notes. Now, I know this doesn't look, like what is this? This will actually show you a real example. So if you're wanting to beat procrastination, you're wanting to find a strategy that's going to help you become a better note taker in class, this is one style, the Cornell method. So if you notice, on the left side up there, they have questions. You see right there, like, why should I ask questions? That's one of the deals. And then over to the right, they actually have, the answers to that. Ask questions, and so it's like, think about definitions. You have the word on one side, the definition, on the other side. And then on the bottom, that's the big difference when it comes to Cornell method. They have a summary. So imagine after class, right after class, if you had to sit there and come up with maybe 3 or 4 sentences, summarizing what you learned that day in that class. That it creates that higher level thinking. You can just take those notes and then you're ready to get out of there. But if you actually had to sit down there and actually, think about, okay, what did I actually learn today? What was, the professor trying to get across? And you had to summarize that. I mean, it's that higher level of thinking. So, this right here I think is so important. I know we're kind of talking about study skills, here, but I do think procrastination and study skills kind of, tying together. So they say that typically, you should, take notes, and of course I always say rewrite your notes personally, after class, because sometimes they'll be kind of sloppy. You're just trying to get everything written down. But they will say that, after 2 weeks, that you will have forgotten up to 70% of what you learned, that day. So, I mean, that's why I say, you need to be using, some of that spare time to be going back and looking over your notes, because this is why, you have to cram the day before, because you're not looking at them every single day. So you're going to have to put a lot more time in that last day before you go take the test, is because you're just trying to cram everything in. But if you're looking at it a little bit every day, if you just spend 15 or 20 minutes a day just going back and just glancing at your notes, you're not going to have to study nearly as hard towards that, the day before the test, because you're going to be able to memorize a lot more of that information because you're going over it every day. It's especially important if you're going to take a math class. Math class, if you are not looking at those math problems every day, you're going to forget the steps. I mean, that just typically happens unless you're great at math. And so you should review your notes, especially within a few hours after taking your notes. Some other things, I think of students who've been procrastinating for a while, they tend to be stressed out. There comes a point in their semester where it's kind of make or break. And we're starting to see this now. And the reason why we're starting to see it now is a lot of the students already had their first test now. We've having a lot of students coming in because they did bad on the first test. They need a tutor now. And so one of the big things, a lot of times I'll ask them is like, I try to figure out their study habits. What have you been doing? And most of them don't study that much at all. I mean, they've been going to class, but that's not simply enough. So I don't necessarily say that they're necessarily procrastinating. They're just not figuring out how to study, the correct way. And that's why, I don't always think everyone fits in that category of procrastination. Maybe they just don't know how to study the right way. How many of you in high school didn't really have to study? Didn't require too much. You show up, how many of your teachers they really wasn't that picky on deadlines? Not as picky as it is now.
My school was strict.
Okay, so your schools are strict. Yours, not so much? You kind of you turn, as long as you get it turned in at some point, basically. And I would tell you the majority of schools tend to fall in that category. And so when they come to college, it's not that they're necessarily procrastinating, it's just they never really had to put that much time into classes. And I will tell you, you will have plenty of classes here on campus, you can get away with it. I mean, you're not going to have to study that much. But then there's other classes that are just like you hit that roadblock, and it's just like to the next level. And then you got to figure it out pretty quick, or you're going to end up failing the class or have to drop the class or whatever happens. And so that's why I say it's important to be addressing this stuff now. The study habits is probably the most important thing that you can do to help kind of beat procrastination. You know how to study effectively in the right way, you're not going to have to worry about procrastination. And so also, when we talk about stress, if you're not doing your homework, I mean, what's going to happen? I mean, we can say your heart races, all this stuff, kind of get sweaty, palms, all that stuff, get nervous. I mean, everyone handles, the stress in a different way. Some of us kind of get, snappy, and we're snapping at our friends, because we're upset, a lot going on, stressed out. I mean, tell me what happens typically when you're stressed out. Describe your behavior. What happens when you're stressed out? And maybe it relates to school, I don't know.
I cry.
Okay, cry. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's good. Common.
Snap.
What's that?
I lose my appetite.
Lose your appetite, don't want to eat. Okay.
I just snap.
And you're snappy, attacking people.
I stay quiet.
Okay, so being quiet, just don't want to talk to people, just not in the mood, to deal with stuff. And so what happens when you're not in the mood to deal with stuff? What ends up happening then?
I stay in my room.
Stay in your room? Yeah, but does anything really get done too much then? Yeah, and it just gets more stress, and so I always say you have to figure out ways to avoid that, and it's not going to be easy. I mean, you're going to have plenty of days where you're going to have those stressful days, but it's how to handle it is going to be the key. And so you may look like this if you're stressed. I don't know. I'm assuming I'm visualizing you in your room with that face. So, I mean, everyone handles stress in different ways. I'm cranky. Normally I'm stressed. I'm just cranky. I want to be left alone. Now normally I will focus on what I need to do. I just don't want to be bothered while I'm doing it. It's kind of like, leave me alone. I'm going to take care of this. I don't want to deal with anything else. So I shut off everything else in my life so I can focus on that one thing. That's not always good, but I mean, that's typically how I do it. So how can we conquer that stress level? One, I do think exercise. I do think you need to be spending that money wisely. You're paying $150 a semester, so you should go to the gym, work out a little bit, even if it's one day a week, just something. Get your mind off of things. And maybe, since you guys are friends, go to the gym together. Find a workout partner. You can go there, and kind of do stuff. They have classes that you can take. Free classes. I mean, you can pay for some classes, for college credit, but they also have a lot of free classes, aerobic classes that they just do. And so going down there to the gym and looking at their schedule, you may decide to all do a yoga class together for fun. And it gets you away, from, some assignments for a little bit, which I think it can help you when you go back to it. Because how many times have you been just burned out? You have looked at the same, notes or whatever over and over and over, and you just don't want to look at it anymore for a while. Going working out may get your mind off it a little bit, and then you get to come back, and then you can deal with it later. I used to always take a lot of breaks. Normally when I studied, I would study 15 to 20 minutes. Then I take a break, go do something, then I come back. But I will do that off and on throughout the day. And that has been the greatest advantage I felt like I had in college, was being able to do that, because I didn't really feel too burned out by doing that. Sometimes I'd study a while, and then we lived right by Walmart, so we'd go to Walmart, we'd just walk around. And now I'm cheap. I'm the cheapest person on the planet, it seems. And so I would go there and look at magazines, because I didn't want to pay for them. But I'd just go there and I'd just look at some of them. And then back in the day, you could get like a Walmart canned pop, in the vending machine for a quarter. So I'd get a quarter pop. That was my reward, by the way. I'd study, do what I need to. I'd get away, go get a quarter pop, look at some magazines, then I'd go back home and study some more. Not a glamorous life, but I mean, that's basically what I did. So take advantage of different things, whether it's the gym, going out, go to the mall. I mean, the mall's not too far away from here. You can simply go there. Some other things that you may do, obviously we talked about this before, reward yourself on a regular basis, for small goals. Remember, that there is a reason why you're in, this particular situation. So, I mean, in the end, you want to be a social worker, both of you do. So, I mean, you have to be always constantly reminding yourself why you are doing all these assignments. There is a purpose. You're not just doing the assignments, for no reason at all. And I had a hard time with, I didn't like my gen ed classes. I mean, who really does? Because you're just thinking, I want to hurry up and take my classes, that I need. but there is a purpose. I had to take those math classes even though I hated them, so that way I could get that degree. And so it's just reminding myself there is a reason why I'm going through this, and even though it doesn't seem like it at the time. Yoga or exercise, I do think it's important to do some type of exercise. Practice a hobby. Do you have any hobby? Anything that you do, hobby-wise? I golf. I love golfing. But,
I used to draw, but I don't do it anymore.
Okay. And why don't you do it anymore?
I don't know, I just kind of stopped.
This is the semester. Draw me something. I can draw a Batman symbol. It's not a very good one, but that's the only thing I can draw. So, practice deep breathing. I don't know so much about that. It may look a little creepy, if you're, out there in the lion's den, just breathing really hard for no reason. So, if you're going to breathe hard, or whatever, you may do it in your room or something, somewhere where people are not watching you. But I remember this because my story is a little bit different than some. I dropped out of school when I was in 8th grade. I was the worst student imaginable. I'd missed so much school when I was a kid. I was very far behind. And my home environment was, it was chaotic. So I dropped out. I tried to go back. I saw where behind, it just wasn't working. And so when I was 19 years old, I was reading at a 3rd grade reading level. I was far behind. And I ended up learning about a literacy program that they had in our local town. And ended up joining. And so the person that was teaching me how to read, this is the thing that he liked doing. And so, breathing. So, we'd be in this little room, and we had these books. They're called challengers. So they're little reading books or whatever. And, he helps me read. And we go over vocabulary, different things. I have to read out loud to him. And so I'd be reading out loud to him. I'd get stumbled on some words. And so I'd be kind of stressed out, just kind of like, oh my God, messing up. I always called it my robot voice in the beginning because I read so slow. And so a lot of times what he would do, and keep in mind, I'm 19 years old. He's like 55, 56 years old, somewhere around there. And so we're sitting at these little desks, and he'd put his hand on the table like this. And then he's like, touch my hand. I'm thinking, okay, this is a little creepy. 19, 57-year-old want me to hold his hand. And so he's like, just trust me. And so I put my hand on his hand, and he says, now take a deep breath. And so we'd be sitting there, 2 guys basically holding hands and breathing together in a small room. So, it was weird. But we'd sit there and we'd breathe, and it was like, just start over. That's the concept behind it. It's like, just take a deep breath, start over. And so a lot of times I remember when I was in college, and I still stayed in touch with him, after I got out of the literacy program and got my GED and started college. And so when I get stressed out when I'm taking a test, sometimes I'd be actually taking the test in class. And I feel like, because you've had those tests where you're just counting, like, probably missed that problem, so now I can only get an 80 now, or whatever it may be. So you're stretching yourself out. I would kind of just put my hand like that, and I would just kind of visualize us back in that room again. And, he's sitting there taking a deep breath. And so I'd be sitting there, just closing my eyes for a minute, taking a breath, as I'm taking that test. Just trying to say, okay, calm it down, start over. And so that's why I think the deep breathing, it actually can work a little bit. Just don't do it in public that much. So, conclusion, in the end, you've got to decide what's a priority in life. Is it hanging out with friends? Is it, working 40, 50 hours a week plus trying to go to school? Or is school the top priority? It's just deciding what's the most important.